Welcome back to Work Experience Discover, the ESBL podcast. In this episode, my guest is Sebastian Timson Smith from Australia. Some of the YESTA members know him maybe as the former National Secretary of YESTA Australia, but most importantly, and that will be the topic of this episode, is his YESTA internship he did about 4 years back in Austria. He stayed for 10 months, and that's actually quite a considerable amount of time for an internship, and I'm looking forward to discuss with him his work, of course, but also his first impression about Europe and how he used to live here and how he thinks is it different to Australia. So I'm really looking forward, and I hope you enjoyed too, because for me it was quite nice to catch up with him again. And yeah, if you have any feedback for us, please drop us a message, an email, and please enjoy this episode of Work Experience Discover, and see you then also in the next one. So, arriving in Graz, what was your first impression comparing to Melbourne?
Well, I think Melbourne, Europe in general is incredibly different to Australia. Obviously, with Australia, since it's changed a lot in the last sort of 250, 300 years, whereas Europe has had a lot more time than that to, basically develop time. So the first impression is a lot of old buildings. So there's a lot of things that you just don't see in Melbourne. So for example, you can walk around Melbourne and the oldest buildings you will see are maybe 150 years old, which to me seems pretty old. That they're beautiful buildings, but it's nothing compared to Europe. So I guess arriving in Graz, I flew to the airport. The airport's pretty modern, like any small city airport, I guess. And as I got closer towards the center on the bus, it got obviously more and more, I guess, charming would be a good word. And yeah, I guess I just started to realize that it was a lot different to what I expected, being my first time in Europe as well. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think beautiful and charming is the first kind of words that come to my mind.
Yeah, great. You just mentioned when you realized, how was it when you realized that you will spend the next 10 months in Austria compared to Australia? Was there a point of realization? So, okay, I'm living here now for the next time.
That's actually a moment that I always kind of remember. It was the second time that I've actually moved to a different country for a long time. When I was 20, I moved to the US for a year. And I remember arriving there and thinking in the airport, what have I done? Like, is this a mistake? I'm going to be here for so long. But I think when I went to Austria, especially being with IASTI, it already felt kind of comfortable because I had a member of the local committee pick me up from the airport, and everything was a lot more prepared. And being the second time I'd done it as well, it was still a little bit scary, but it was pretty comfortable. So it was exciting more than scary.
I mean, when you said it was the second time you were doing that, I believe, you get more relaxed on the one hand, but still it's exciting actually to move to a different country. And of course, having the comforting surroundings of there was the local committee. We have quite a active local committee here, especially back then. So it was, I think they took a lot of care, and I think you arrived like in May. So then in summer, there was a lot of summer reception going on, what we call it. So
yeah, definitely. There was I was picked up by the airport, obviously, and then we caught a bus to the student dorm that I was living in, and that was the person that picked me up walked me all the way up to my room and everything, made sure I had the key and I could get in, and it was all very easy. And then the next day, another lovely girl, Iris from the committee, she came and met me in the center of town and took me to organize all the paperwork, helped me to create a bank account. Yeah. So that was all at the very start. So it didn't really give me much time to be worried or trying to figure things out by myself, because there was a lot of help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's I think one of the big benefits. And I think coming to Europe, you said the first time, and still everything works a little bit different and in those countries. And I think I looked at it, I think it's 9,000 kilometers, 9 hours time difference. So it would not be so easy just to call home or something, to ask there for help. Luckily, I mean, I think in Austria, especially, a lot of people speak English, especially the younger people, of course. So I think that helped also quite well. How was it for you as a native Austrian accent, so
Well,
to say?
that's actually, again, back to the first time I traveled overseas to America. Even in the US, people had trouble understanding my accent. So while I was there, I actually had to learn to speak more slowly and clearly because people couldn't understand it there. So I guess I had to remind myself again once I got to Austria to do the same thing. But yeah, as you said, everyone, well, especially in the cities and especially young people in Austria, speak very good English. And for me, as someone who only speaks English really fluently, which is common in Australia, most people don't. Anyone who was born in Australia with Australian parents, generally they only speak English, and it's not common to see other languages regularly used. I guess it's becoming more common now. Obviously there's a more diverse culture in Australia as well now than maybe 30 or 40, 50 years ago. But in Austria, of course, and most other places in the world, there's 2, 3, 4 languages being spoken, and it's just common for people to speak 2 languages. And I think for me, one of my goals when I moved to Austria was I really wanted to learn German. So I didn't have much time before my internship, so I did a little bit of Duolingo and tried to practice a bit, but it helped a little bit. But I think every time I tried to practice it in Austria, people would realize that I had bad German and just would reply in English. Yes. So I didn't get a lot of chances to actually practice German apart from when shopping and things like that.
Yes, yes. I mean, I think also German is a quite difficult language to learn because of all those cases.
Definitely. But compared to English, which has no cases.
Indeed. So that's, I think, the most difficult part. It's not like, I mean, some people always say it's also their pronunciation, but I believe also as an Austrian, as a German native speaker, I would not know how to explain why use which case for certain things,
But I guess that's the same with most languages. Like I wouldn't be able to explain why things work the way they do in English either, but I just did it.
I actually just saw a YouTube video the other day from one of the YouTubers I'm following, and he used to teach English in Argentina. And there, of course, he had to explain the very basic things. And he's fluent, he's native in English, but he never thought about certain things. And he was like, how do I explain why you say, as an example, how you write 40 compared to 50? Because sometimes you have an E in there and sometimes, and there is no clear rule why you are using an extra E or not. And
I actually like that about German, that there are a lot of rules that apply almost all of the time, and there's not a whole lot of exceptions. So I found that once I learned the rule and once I learned the pronunciation of each letter in the alphabet, I could read any word and I knew how to pronounce it. Even the ridiculously long words that last the whole line of a page.
Yes.
I could figure out how to say it.
I mean,
which is different in English. You can't do that. But.
I mean, like maybe to go further in this episode, but I think one of the funniest thing about the German language is you can take 2 nouns, put them together, and you have another word, and that's totally valid, a totally valid word. And I think that makes sometimes things easier because it's also quite literal. Also, like if you need the lock at the door, you just say like the word for door in German and the word for lock, and then you have like the door lock in the end, and but translated to German in the end. But I think
it's very practical. And
but maybe let's move on because we're not mainly talking about languages, although that's quite interesting. You did actually a quite interesting internships and also quite long one compared to a lot of internships. It was 10 months in Siemens. as a mechanical engineer. So walk me a little bit through your first day at work and maybe a little bit through your internship and what you learned there.
So basically, well, when I applied for the internship, I got choices of what department I would like to work in. None of them were I was particularly specialized in, but I had studied a little bit of all of them. I ended up working in the fatigue assessment department. Mm-hmm. So that was a lot of finite element modeling, MATLAB, things like that. So the first day, again, there was an ISP committee member who took me to work, made sure I found the right people because Siemens in Graz is quite a big place. So I met my supervisor. They came in, took me down to the office, introduced me to the other team members in the office, and set me up with a computer. And it was all fairly organized. It took a little while for me to actually get some work to do. There was a lot of tutorials about the software that they were using that I hadn't used before, and I think that was pretty common. So it was, I guess it was a slow start, but it was good because they gave me time to learn what I had to do, and I didn't really get thrown in the deep end, which was good and bad in different senses. But I think overall, being that it was such an unfamiliar environment, it was my first time working in an engineering environment. It was good. There were other interns as well that were working there that I already knew because I'd already been in Austria, I think, for about a month, I think it was, before I started working. So that was good, having familiar faces around to go and talk to at lunchtime, and people that were happy to speak English because my German was pretty bad then.
Yeah.
It was actually good, not to get back to the language too much, but my direct supervisor, his English wasn't the greatest. Mm-hmm. So it was good for me to practice my German, and he liked practicing his English as well. So we would sort of help each other out with different words when we were stuck.
Yeah.
That was the beginning, I guess. I was given a project to work on. Basically, there was lots of little things that I did in between, but my main project was actually something from the local university. So basically, it was simulating the friction in a bearing there was a pendulum hanging off a bearing, and I had to figure out how to simulate the friction. So that was something that no one in my team had done before or knew how to do. So I think over the project, I tried maybe 7 or 8 different types of software, trying to figure out how to make it work, and getting advice from all sorts of different people. And eventually I put together a bit of a sort of a portfolio or some kind of project guide about what was involved. It wasn't really directly related to the work that the company was doing, but it was something that was needed for them for future research to be able to actually do that work. And of course, there was lots of other little projects in between that were related to the work the company was doing as well. So it was a good range of activities I got to do, I guess.
So actually, I think that's a quite nice starting into an engineering field. You said it was your first time working in an engineering environment. So I think it's a quite nice start, actually, because at the beginning, you have to get used somehow to the processes and also to how to work in a big company like Siemens. I mean, everybody knows somehow Siemens, and if you Google the logo or something, you then notice that they are basically everywhere. And I think that would sound to me like a very nice start, to be honest. Also with the trainings at the beginning, I think that's common in big companies, that you first have a lot of trainings. I mean, I guess there was also some kind of security and tailgating and how to enter the company or something.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, even in the job that I'm working in now, it was the same thing. When I first started as a graduate, I was doing a lot of tutorials and learning, and not I wasn't really doing any useful work for a little while, but that's pretty normal. I guess in my internship, it was good that I did actually get to do something useful, but it really opened my eyes to the scale of what the work involves in an engineering company. Where I mean, there was I think there's about 900 people roughly working at that plant, and maybe 200, 250 engineers, and a lot of other staff, obviously building the parts of the train bogies, which is what the factory does.
Yeah.
And it just made me realize how much work actually goes involved. It goes into building something and designing something.
Yes.
It was very interesting.
How do you think, because I think a lot of, let's say, recent graduates who never did a, let's say, internship, not with this, but in general, never worked before in an engineering environment, they graduate from university and they are somehow, I don't want to say disappointed, but they don't know that although you seem to just work on a very small part of the end product, that it's quite essential actually in the end for the succession, for the success of the whole company. How do you think compared that when you started at your current working place and knowing already from your experience before with the internship, how did it change, like in the beginning now when you got at your first assignment, which was I believe rather small compared, or quite standalone project at the beginning normally when you started work?
Yeah, well, I guess it's generally big companies are doing big projects. That's often how it ends up. And these big projects mean a lot. They're often very famous, and people can say, hey, look, I worked on that project, and it can be something you can be proud of. But as you said, most of the time, being such a big project, you're only going to play a small part in that project because it's impossible to do more. It's just, there's only so much work one person can do. And I guess the company that I work in now is smaller. So recently I finished finished working on the first project that I was sort of managing myself, and that was refurbishment of a football ground. So it was comparatively it was quite small, but it meant that I got to run the whole project, and I did quite a lot of work, and it felt meaningful, but at the same time it wasn't a big project. So I guess it depends on people's preferences, but it definitely helps to have experience in both areas, just to understand what the industry is really like.
Yes, indeed. I mean, I think it, like you said, it's fun. It depends on the person themselves, because I personally enjoy a lot to work like for these huge companies, because of course they have a very well reputation, but I think I like to be part of this really huge network in the end. But there are others who prefer to have like a smaller team and to also have maybe some more connection. I don't know how to say that, but more connection to the project and the standalone project, and say, I did that or something like that. I think that's on the person.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think as well with IASD internships, a lot of people when they first apply, their eyes will automatically follow the big names like Siemens and ones that are famous, and the smaller companies will often get overlooked because they just don't know them.
Yes.
But I think it is an important thing to note that those small companies can provide very good experience as well.
Absolutely.
And often even maybe more experience if you're there for a short time. So I mean, it's different with everyone, but I think that's something that often gets forgotten.
Yes, indeed. I mean, especially in smaller companies, doing an ES internship has the possibility. Most of the times they are really in love with ES in the hosting country, or they are really like supporting the brand there, because they normally can hire like within their countries, but they choose to bring in like your supervisor. They choose to bring someone in who speaks English, as an example, to train their own skills, and also bring in their new ideas from. I think in Mongolia, as an example, they are working with the ESTA to bring in architects and civil engineers from Europe to bring in the knowledge, actually. So that's our kind of teaching jobs in the end, which is quite interesting. I believe you're maybe in your masters, and then you go there to basically bring the knowledge you gain from university directly there to the current offices, so that they have the approaches from Europe. Which is state of the art here.
Yeah, definitely.
Coming maybe a little bit like to an application process. I don't want to ask much about normally too many details about the application process, but if a student from Australia is listening. How approximately does it work? I mean, not like on this deadline you have to do that. That's I think
Yeah.
that they can read it up. But in general, how was it working, and where was the support from Australia to bring you then to Europe?
So I guess it was actually quite easy. So for me, my application was through ISB Austria, and obviously ISB Austria is one of the most active committees and very on top of everything. So there was step-by-step instructions that made it very clear what type of visa I had to get. So obviously there's a lot of visas out there and there's a lot of different rules, especially for anyone who's tried to come to Australia. It's quite difficult, but for me,
I'm
it was
just
quite
laughing
easy.
for everyone who is at YouTube. That was for a long time my job, actually, doing all those visa stuff. That's why
Yeah.
was smiling now a lot. But sorry, Sebastian, for interrupting.
No, I understand. I mean, even for me as well, like being part of the committee in Australia showed me the different visa application processes that are involved in different countries, and some of them are quite difficult. I guess in Australia it's often quite easy to get a visa, but we're very lucky with that. That I've found most countries, the applications that I've dealt with, most countries, or pretty well all countries, make it very easy. They make it very clear. Even if the application process is difficult, I actually will tell you how to navigate that process. So for me, it was very easy. There were quite a few steps, not quite as many as when I went to the US. That was crazy, but Austria, I think I applied, and within a couple of months it was sorted. When I arrived, I also had to go and I forgot what it's called now. Get some kind of work permit anyway, and I had to do that on arrival. But even that, it was very easy. Go to the office, sign some paperwork, give them a passport, I think, and it was a pretty easy process.
Yeah, I mean that's a specialty from Austria. But for Central Europe, you needed a resident permit, as it's called, because you stayed longer than 6 months.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, that's like, I think that's one of the big benefits of Fiesta, because also for me, when I did my internship in Qatar, I got clear instruction what to do, what I need to bring then to Qatar directly to get all the paperwork done. And I think that helps a lot, because the visa jungle is really difficult.
Trying to navigate that by yourself, if you didn't know what to look for, I think it would be quite difficult. So
yes.
I found it easy.
Yes, that's cool. So being now then in Austria, let's talk a little bit about the free time, because as you said, you were the first time in Europe. So I believe you also used the time also to travel around a little bit to see, because what I learned most from trainees is that everyone is like really amazed how close everything is. Yeah, you catch a flight and within 2 hours you are basically in Madrid or Lisbon or Rome. And compared to the US, as an example, where I take a 2 hour flight to get from Washington to Atlanta, as an example.
Wow, yeah, exactly. I mean, the same as in Australia as well. I mean, you can fly for 6 hours and still not leave Australia.
Yes,
but
indeed.
I think it was very strange for me. And it was a bit of it felt kind of, I don't know, special that I could say, hey, look, I've been in 3 countries in one day, and I haven't taken a plane, I've driven. And that for me is very unusual. But I think I was lucky the time of year that I was there as well, because I arrived in May, which was before a lot of the other interns had arrived, in the busy summer period. So it gave me time to settle in, and then a bunch of people arrived, and all of the ISD weekends started. So for anyone who doesn't know what that is, especially in Europe, I'm not sure about, I think other places do it as well, but cities with ISD local committees will host a weekend where they'll invite a bunch of different students from around nearby countries or wherever they would like to come from, and they'll, it could be all sorts of city activities or hiking or parties and all sorts of, basically big social events with all of these different interns that are all doing the same experience and all coming together to share that experience in a new place. And the best thing is that you're hosted by locals. So we get to see all of the best sites. We know what to do. Everything's organized. We have accommodation, food, and it's a great weekend away, and it's easy. It's usually very cheap. It's a small fee that you have to pay for for accommodation or food or whatever's involved. So generally, or over summer, obviously there are a lot of those weekends. So myself and a bunch of the other interns that were also in Graz, I think there were maybe 25 or 30 interns in Graz in the peak period. So that was very good.
Yeah.
So usually we would rent a van, and so 9 of us would drive to some other country and spend a weekend, share the cost of the van and go exploring. And I guess over that time, over the summer, I became quite close with some of these people, and now some of them are some of my best friends. So we still keep in touch regularly, and even today I was talking to someone from Graz.
Oh, cool.
And it was a very special thing to be able to share that experience with all of these different people from all different places. And it wasn't just Austrians that I was spending time with. It was all of these other nationalities that had come, to do the same thing. So I think that part of it was the most meaningful for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's something. It was a period of my life that I'll never forget. I sometimes wish that I could go back to it, but I guess it's not a realistic thing, really. But it's a great memory anyway. And because it was almost a year, so it felt like I lived there. That felt like my home.
Yes.
While I was there, so it was definitely a special thing.
Yeah, I think having those places where everyone is together and you have all those different nationalities. I think just the other day I watched, like, there's a trailer, because now after COVID, luckily some of those weekends are coming back in Central Europe, and I watched one of the trailers, and it was the video actually from the weekend I attended like 5 years ago, and so on. It was like, wow, it would be really nice to go back there again. It was a really great weekend.
Yeah.
But it's part of growing up. But that's I'm really happy that they're still around, and so to say we survived the COVID period, and hopefully a lot of trainees can experience the same as we did in the end. And
yeah, exactly. I mean, it's such a good thing that I feel like you can't really understand completely until you do it.
Yeah.
And the social side, making those close connections with friends is something that's what sticks, and that's what makes it worthwhile. And I think having the help to do that is very important. Like, for example, if I was to go traveling by myself to a different country, I'm someone who likes to socialize, but I might not really go out of my way and try to just meet strangers and go and party or go on a hike or something, because it's not so easy to just go and randomly meet people. But having someone having an organization bring you together with people who are also in the same mindset, that they like to have friends, they like to socialize, but they may not otherwise go and find it. It was great.
That's I totally agree. It makes it a little bit easier to get in touch with people, and it's a little bit easier, and it lowers a little bit the barrier of getting to know someone. And
exactly. Yeah. There's something in common that can open the conversation.
Yeah. So actually, I read something interesting on your LinkedIn profile. You maybe saw it already, that I also always do that before interviewing someone. And there's a simple question I want to ask: did you went skiing in Austria?
Of course.
No,
skiing for me is the number one. So
yes, because
that's actually why I went to the US. So.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So you worked there because
I was teaching skiing too.
That's what I wanted to ask. Like, how was it to be in the Alps in general as a skiing instructor? Because I saw that on your profile.
Well, so when I went to the US, I was teaching, and I went to Lake Tahoe, which I don't know, it's a reasonably famous place, and it's absolutely beautiful. And that was the most beautiful place that I'd ever been to until I went to Austria. And I think, absolutely, the Alps in Austria are by far the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And being able to ski in that, that was amazing. It's very different to Australia. I'm hoping actually to go skiing this weekend.
Okay.
We've just had a lot of snow here, but we've also just been in a lockdown for the last 2 weeks, so no one's been able to go skiing.
Indeed. So Melbourne
But
was in the lockdown. I always forget
yeah,
actually that there are so high mountains in Australia that you can ski there. Always
well,
somehow.
that's actually what I was going to say. They're not that high, really. I mean, we have enough snow to have good skiing, but the mountains are nothing like the Alps. They're
Hmm.
more round and flat rather than pointy, and
Hmm.
like you picture the Alps to be. And it's very different and very beautiful. So that was definitely a highlight. And actually,
Yeah.
the first time I went skiing in Austria was an IASTI event as well, at Tellemse.
Ah, yeah. It was like there is the winter event from one of the local committees, I believe.
Yeah, I think the
Yeah.
Boku ski event it was,
Yes, indeed.
and
Yeah.
there was maybe 50 people there.
Yeah.
So that was great.
So for explanation, so yes, the Austria always has an internal event for actually for the members and for the trainees still being in Austria, because there are a lot of long-term internships like you did, Sebastian. And like always in December, there is an special event like for to go skiing and or going to the spa, and that's quite nice because it's also like, especially because for before Christmas, it's always like the last, let's say, motivation event, and then everybody goes home for Christmas and spends the time with the family. And
Yeah, nice way to start winter.
yeah, indeed. So coming a little bit to the end of our conversation, there's always a question I ask everyone before we close down these talks, and um, the question is, why do you imagine you can now speak to every student in, let's say, in Australia, but everybody understands you, related to being an engineer or a natural science or even economy students. Why do you believe that every student should get involved with IESTE, either going on an internship or being active in one of the local committees or getting involved in some way with IESTE or to go on internship? Why do you believe everybody should do that?
Well, I think the three words that you'll see on a lot of IASTI logos, that work, experience, discover, those three explain it all. So to go into it a bit more deeply, obviously work experience is important for your education and for your career. What I said earlier about understanding the industry on how it really is, not just what you are told from a lecturer at university. That's obviously very important, but the life experience that you get out of that doesn't just benefit you for fun or socially. It helps with maturity. I think, for example, if you were, most students have maybe lived at home, they've studied, they've had everything paid for, mostly probably a part-time job, and then imagine they just go and get a full-time job. They're thrown straight into the workforce and slapped in the face and said, "Okay, time to grow up." And it's difficult. You can't. A lot of people will struggle with that. And an internship is that stepping stone that will give you that life experience where you can say, "Hey, I've gone through all of these challenges and I've made sure I've got through it." Because as much as I've said how organized IASTI has been with helping me with my internship, there's always challenges. Nothing will ever be completely perfect. In you're traveling overseas to work in a different country. It's a big process. So there's always going to be challenges to overcome, and learning how to overcome those challenges as a part of life, I think, is very, very important. And of course, the social side of it. For me, it feels pretty amazing to have all of these friends in lots of different countries around the world, and to have just those connections that I've made, the memories that we've had traveling together, experiencing things that I might never have seen otherwise, and the ease at which I could do it. And specifically with IASTI, it makes it so easy to do these things, whereas you're not trying to go and book all your hotels and pay for everything in an expensive way, when if you do it as a group in a pre-organized way by people who know what they're doing, it just makes that amazingly good experience amazingly easy, I guess. So yeah, that's what I think.
Thank you very much, Sebastian.